Hi, welcome back for another one of my cooking videos. Today we are going to be baking something very simple, although it's something that I know some people struggle with, so hopefully my recipe will overcome those things for you. So today we're going to be making a classic Victoria sponge. So to start off, I'm going to have a sip of my coffee. To start off, we're going to set our oven temperature. And I've got an electric oven, so it's going to be set to 190 degrees centigrade. And if you've got a gas oven, you want to set it to a gas mark 5 so that we can get the oven temperature up to where we need it to be. Okay, so we are going to crack straight on with our Victoria sponge. Now today's Victoria sponge, we are going to have a nice sweetened cream, fresh cream, and strawberry filling. So we'll be doing that and we'll be coming back to do that later once we've made our cake and it's cooled down nicely. Now I know some people struggle with a classic Victoria sponge purely because they can't get the correct measurement ratio, and I am going to show you a little trick that I learnt a little while back which has helped me no end to get the best Victoria sponge in terms of having a nice moist sponge, and also to get a well-risen sponge as well, because I think a number of people struggle with it sinking. Not good. So the trick is with our eggs. What we're going to do is today's Victoria sponge is, shall we do a 3 or a 4 egg sponge? Let's push the boat out. Let's do a 4 egg sponge. 1, 2, 3, 4. What we're going to do is we're going to crack and weigh our eggs. And that way that will tell us how much of all our other ingredients we need. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. There we go, 4 eggs, lovely. And our weight on those 4 eggs is 205 grams. So the weight of our eggs is going to tell us that we need 205 grams of self-raising flour, 205 grams of sugar, and 205 grams of butter. That's how easy it is to make sure you get the correct and the best ratio of all your ingredients for the perfect Victoria sponge. So I'm going to move my eggs to one side, bring in my mixing bowl. So we have 205 grams of white caster sugar, pop that straight into the bowl, and we have 205 grams of butter. Now I use unsalted butter. You can use salted butter, you can use margarine, you can use anything, but what I tend to do is use unsalted butter, and then I will add half a teaspoon of salt into the mixture, because then you can just gauge a bit better how salty your mixture is going to be. Not that cake is salty, because salt is a naturally sweet agent as well. So we're going to pop the butter into the sugar. And what we're going to do now is we're going to whisk our sugar and our butter until it's light and fluffy. Now I think sometimes this is where people make a mistake, in that they undermix their butter and sugar because they're just impatient. So don't be impatient. Get your whisk. You can do it by hand. It'll take you a lot longer. And we're going to whisk this up till it's light and fluffy. Okay, so we've whisked our mixture up, and you should be able to see now that's quite light, almost white even, now that we've mixed it in well together. And I should have said you want your butter really at room temperature, otherwise it will be very difficult to whisk up and you'll find you'll have butter jumping out of the bowl all over the place. Now what we're going to do is add the eggs one at a time to our mixture and keep whisking it in. You might find that your mixture starts to curdle slightly, especially if you've kept your eggs in the fridge, which you shouldn't do, by the way. But that's not a problem. If the mixture does curdle a little bit, it doesn't matter. That's one. Two. Three. And our last egg. And then let's thoroughly mix those in together. Okay, great. Now, my mixture hasn't curdled because I don't keep my eggs in the fridge. So like I said, if it does curdle slightly, it really isn't a problem. It just looks a bit manky in the bowl at that point, but it's really not an issue. Just stop leaving your eggs in the fridge, basically. Right, now what we're going to do is we're going to measure out 205 grams of self-raising flour. Okay, so we have 205 grams of self-raising flour, and we are going to gradually add that into our mixture, mixing it in as we go. Now, if you've never made cakes before, if this is your first time, word of warning, don't put your whisk straight into the flour because it will just blow up in your face and go everywhere. You want to gradually just push the mixture into the flour so it all stays in the bowl. First bit in. What you can do with this recipe, like with many others, if you've got a food processor, you can just throw it all into the food processor and mix up together. I don't have one. So we are going to mix our flour in bit by bit. Also, you can, if you are worried about the flour going everywhere, simply get a spoon out and fold the mixture in together. Then your flour won't blow up everywhere. with our last bit of flour, what I'm also going to do is measure out a teaspoon of baking powder to add in. Now we are using self-raising flour, but the extra teaspoonful of baking powder will just help the cake have a little bit more rise to it. So just 1 teaspoon of baking powder in with our mix, and let's just blitz this. So we've had 205 grams of eggs, 205 grams of caster sugar, 205 grams of butter unsalted, 205 grams of self-raising flour, and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Now we're just going to add the last few ingredients. We're going to add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Sometimes I actually put in almond extract because I really love the taste of almonds. So sometimes, depending on what my filling is going to be, I will sometimes use almond extract, but I'm going to use vanilla extract today. And we are also going to put in half a teaspoon of salt into our mixture. And our vanilla extract. So we're going to give that one final blast with the mixer to mix all those ingredients in well together. Now sometimes you'll see in a Victoria sponge recipe, not that you need any other recipe after you've followed this one, you will see that they will sometimes add milk. Generally speaking, if you add different ratios of egg weight to flour and sugar, then your mixture can be really, really thick and stodgy. Normally, if you've got the same ratio of egg weight to sugar to butter to flour, your mixture shouldn't be too stodgy, and this one isn't. As you can see here, it's quite a nice drippy consistency. If you do think your mixture is a bit stodgy, then you can add either a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons to the mixture. However, we won't be doing that today. One of the best things about this particular cake mixture is it tastes absolutely delicious. Bear in mind, if you're going to stick your finger in the mixture and eat it, just think who your audience is and think about who you've got coming around to eat your cake, because nobody wants your mucky fingers in their cake mix. But it is really good. I love cake batter. Anyway, what we're going to do now is to quickly line 2 cake tins, because I've not done that yet. So what you want to do is just grease the insides of the tins and then place some parchment paper on the bottoms so that your cake doesn't stick on the bottom of the tin. If you're lucky, you will have lots of batter left on the spatula or spoon to eat. So nice. Of course, bear in mind, if you are going to eat cake batter, it does have raw eggs in it, so be mindful of that. Okay, what we're going to do now is we are going to pop our cake mixture into our oven for approximately 25 minutes, and we want to ensure that it's cooked until they're slightly brown on the top, and that you can either insert a clean knife into the center of the cake and it comes out clean, you'll also have a springy top. You don't want to overcook it though, because obviously we don't want dry cake. So we're going to pop those into the oven now for about 25 minutes. So our oven's been beeping, so let's check out our cakes. So it's looking quite brown and risen. And the knife comes out nice and clean, but you can see a bit of moisture on the knife, which is good because that means our cake hasn't gone really dry. And out comes the second one. So we know that the first one's done, so we're not going to stick a knife in the top of this one, and this can be our top layer with no holes in it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to allow the cake to cool down slightly before we turn them out. What you'll do is if you try and take the cake out now whilst it's still hot, you'll just damage the sides of it. So what you'll find is the cake will shrink back slightly, and then once that's happened, you can just use a knife around the sides of the cake to loosen it slightly. So we'll do that in a second. Okay, literally only a minute or two have passed, but our cake has shrunk back slightly around the edges now. You should be able to see that, and we can now take the cake out. So we are going to just insert a knife which goes right around the tin, nice and clean, and you can turn that now out onto a what's it called? Wire rack. That's the word I was looking for, I couldn't think. And you can also remove your parchment paper from the bottom of the cake. And you can see there that our cake looks nice and moist. Now we need to allow that to cool down quite considerably before we are able to put anything on it. I'm just going to turn our other cake out now onto another wire rack. Don't waste any bits of sponge that are on the paper. Scrape them off and sample your cake. It's lush. So good. Okay, so we're going to allow our cake to cool right down, and then we will come back in a moment and we will make up our filling, which today is going to be double cream with some icing sugar in it to sweeten it up and some fresh strawberries. So we have now allowed time for our cakes to cool down. We've had a cup of coffee, reapplied our lipstick, all very important things. What we are going to do now is we are going to fill our cake. So you should have two lovely halves of a cake. As you can see, they have risen quite nicely and are quite even all the way around. Today we're going to be using some fresh double cream and some fresh strawberries. So I have measured out 300 millilitres of fresh double cream, and we are going to give that a nice whisk. But before we do, just to add that little bit of sweetness, we're going to put in 3 large tablespoons of icing sugar. 1, 2, 3. Now you don't have to add icing sugar. If you like fresh cream as it is, which I do, then feel free to just whisk it up on its own. But if you just like that extra little bit of sweetness in there, then add the sugar. Stuff the diet. And we're going to whisk that now until it's a nice consistency. We don't want to over whisk it because then it goes all clogged together. So just a nice consistency. Okay, so I've been whisking. I whisked that on a high power for about 2 minutes, and you can see there the cream has clumped together a bit, but not over clumped, if my terminology makes sense, and that will provide us with a nice even spread on the cake. So we have our first cake half, and we're going to take our cream and we are now going to put a nice thick layer in the centre of our cake. Now you don't have to use all the cream. It's really, at this point it is about according to taste, whether or not you like lots of cream or not. I do. Let's face it, if you're going to have cake and not worry about the diet, you may as well put lots of cream in the middle. Any leftover cream, of course, you can just have on the side of the plate. And try and spread that out nice and evenly so that the top half of your cake goes on nice and relatively level. And now we're going to take our fresh strawberries, cut the greens off, and then cut them into slices and place that over the cream. For speed, I have cut my strawberries already. Now you don't need to worry about how they look when they're placed, because you're going to have your top layer of cake on as well. But get them nice and close to the edge. To make sure that the whole cake is filled. Getting cream all over myself. Then keep placing them until you have filled the whole cake. There we are, just about squeezed them all in. Okay, so there we have our cake covered with cream and strawberries. We are going to put the top layer of the cake on now. There we have it so far. Now a lot of people like to put a icing sugar dusting on the top of our cake, so we will do the same. And if you don't have a proper sieve, you can just use a tea strainer or something like that to put the dust in on the top of your cake. And to finish off, we're just going to put 2 big strawberries on the top. And there we have it. 1 strawberry and cream Victoria sandwich. As easy as that. So, I hope you've enjoyed another one of my videos. Hopefully you'll find this recipe is as easy as the others and you'll be able to make yourself a delicious Victoria sandwich. Of course, if you want to fill the Victoria sandwich with other things, butter icing, jam is quite traditional as well, then obviously you can do. And you can also make the cakes smaller. So if you wanted to do either a 2 or a 3 egg cake, follow exactly the same method, just use 2 or 3 eggs instead, measure those out and then use the same ratio of self-raising flour, sugar and butter, and you'll just have a smaller cake. This one's quite a thick cake, but it's well risen, as you can see, which was aided along by that extra teaspoon of baking powder as well. So I hope you've enjoyed the video and I'll see you all again soon in my next video. Enjoy your cake. Thank you.